Hey, crispy, crunchy, and nutritious. This is the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works. Danny Pommells, Noah Levick here, Ben Barry making things happen behind the scenes, our producer extraordinaire. A Wednesday night trip down to the ATL results in the loss for the 76ers. 139-132 in overtime. Exciting game. A lot of dunks. A lot of stuff that you expect to see in an NBA game with high level competition. I mean, it was a good matchup on a lot of aspects. The Sixers without Joel Embiid, though, which was probably the leveling thing that made it much more competitive than maybe it should have been if he had been there. But Noah Levick, fresh from a trip to the ATL and back. Welcome back to Philly, sir. How you feeling?
Thanks. Yeah, probably a little more tired than usual, but yeah, no, it was an exciting game, and yeah, definitely Joel Embiid's absence, the headliner, but I think you're right. It didn't take away from some real quality, high drama stuff in the final minutes. Yeah, Atlanta was shorthanded as well. We should note Clint Capella, their starting big man, was out. DeAndre Hunter sidelined. But yeah, definitely an improved performance from the Sixers relative to the weekend when we were discussing the lack of effort and some of the concerns in that regard. But nevertheless, another loss and a three-game losing streak. Now they're high for this season.
Still almost gave up 140 points, so the defense may or may not have had a tough night, depending on the fact that it did go to overtime. But um, did you feel like you saw a difference in some of the things that you had highlighted in the article about the closeouts, the transition defense, and those things as far as Nick Nurse upping the ante at practice on Monday, and how did those things play into how they played on Wednesday?
Yeah, I think they were much better in those areas. Definitely a persistent issue, I think, for many players on this team is they foul a little too much. So not ideal without Joel Embiid to have both Paul Reed and Mo Bamba get two quick ones. And the Sixers were using 11 guys by the end of the first quarter. But I think they did fight pretty well, and they think they handled themselves decently given the circumstances. But yeah, transition defense, I believe it was 16 to 15 Sixers in fast break points. And I think you did not see those instances of guys being like obviously discouraged and letting missed shots bleed into some lax moments with the transition D. So yeah, I think like the fundamental ingredients were pretty encouraging from this game, but still pretty bitter to, in the end, hold a 4-point lead with under a minute left.
Yeah.
That's a game you should win. And, credit to the Hawks. Like Jalen Johnson had a fantastic game. I think he had something like 26, 15, and 7 and was really clutch on both ends of the ball. And Atlanta did a lot of things to sort of take this one from the Sixers' grasp. But still, in the end, you'll be disappointed to have that opportunity to get a really feel-good win, the third of the season without Embiid, and then boom, it doesn't happen. Tyrese Maxey fouls out. Sixers are unable to close the deal in overtime. Now you're looking at a 2-7 record without Joel Embiid, which is obviously a bad trend and a contrast from last year where they went an impressive 11-5 in Embiidless games. They've been better in many ways under Nurse, but the performances when Embiid is out is not one of those ways.
Yeah, and the schedule is not quite as favorable for them here. Three of the next four, some tough ones coming up. The Kings on the horizon, as well as the Nuggets. Um, but let's get to the crux of it. You mentioned that Jalen Johnson dagger three. You mentioned the 5-point lead they had. Tyrese Maxey with a ridiculous drive to the cup and dunk, and a then step back three from way beyond the arc that splashes for him. He gets 35 points on 29 shots. They needed every bit of it, as you can see, because they ended up losing the basketball game. But I don't know. I just am that guy. Make of it what you will. It's one of those stupid old school things. When the Hawks got to 100 points first, I just felt like it was trending the way of being one of those games where the Sixers, as we've seen in other games in the past, where they exude so much energy trying to get even or ahead the hole that they had to dig out of tends to be insurmountable in the end because a couple of balls don't go their way, a couple of foul calls don't go their way. Tyrese Maxey clearly smacked on the arm at the end of regulation when he did that little drop step spin move trying to go to the cup, and Trae Young smacks his arm and then has this ridiculous guilty look on his face. I don't, if you look at the video, like he caught his hand in the cookie jar, and no call. Maxey loses the ball out of bounds, and we go to overtime. But I guess he'll get those calls eventually. Like it's, at some point. I mean, we talked about on previous podcasts about him and Nick Nurse emphasizing the referees of how he's being guarded and things like that. But I don't know. I guess it's the NBA. You're just not getting that call on a star like Trae Young, and I don't know. Make sense of it for me, Noah.
Yeah, I was actually a little surprised it didn't boil over into something more extreme reaction-wise.
There were technicals too. There were technicals in there. Tobias Harris, a guy who often doesn't get teed up, got teed up. And
right, a lot of fouls, a lot of techs, but that was not one of the fouls. And yeah, Nurse was pretty persistent in letting the officials know he thought they'd missed that call. Post game, he actually didn't harp on that one as much, but the call that got Tyrese Maxey his sixth foul in overtime, clearly displeased with that one, and I think for good reason. I mean, Trae Young on a few occasions had tried to bait the Sixers into calls, tried to lead into Jaden Springer and sort of draw whistles, in slightly shady ways, perhaps. For me, that call is a pretty strange one to make in a tight game like that, and you're not supposed to, of course, take into context the fact that Tyrese Maxey is playing really well. It's a fun duel, and he's got 5 fouls. But I think regardless, you can understand the Sixers being especially frustrated there. And I didn't really see anything Tyrese Maxey did wrong on that play. So I think the Sixers are right to have somewhat of a gripe in that instance. But I also think, they lost the game for many other reasons besides officiating. And it was weird game in a few ways. I think their second unit did give them the desired jolt late in the first, early in the second quarter, and the starters had some rough patches in this one. But that kind of at the end of the day, they were up 4 with under a minute left, and a few mistakes, including conceding a couple back cuts to the Hawks, which Nurse mentioned. Those are ones they're kind of regret at the end of the day. But I still think, the sentiments seem to be like we're not especially discouraged about this game. And I think given the, recent comments from Nick Nurse in which he did not conceal at all the fact that he thought his team had played badly and that the effort had been unacceptable, I think you take those as pretty legitimate, assessments of his team. I think they did a lot of things well here. But of course, the standard needs to be higher, right? When Joel Embiid is out, and it just was, not quite good enough, and the luck was not quite enough on their side down the stretch.
And a lot of things playing out. And while you do mention the improvement the team has made, you mentioned that second unit, and there are some trends developing and things you see materializing. And particularly when you look in the recent history, I just still don't feel comfortable with who's in the middle when Joel is out. We saw a lot of dunks here from the Hawks, and yeah, they're athletic. They have guys who can get to the rim, and I just feel like it was an emphasis and a strangeness about how the Sixers went about the center position in the offseason when they had Montrezl Harrell and Mo Bamba and re-signed Paul Reed, and there wasn't quite clarity there, but it just continues to show that what happens when Joel's not on the floor with who's protecting the rim needs to continue to be a priority. Dwight Howard and Andre Drummond were the best things we've seen behind Joel since he's been here, and I'm not as Mo Bamba did have some great plays and some good blocks. Doesn't quite have the veteran savvy or isn't as skilled as Andre Drummond because he's an incredible rebounder as well as can be a defensive force at times. Dwight Howard still had some things and a knack for energy and stuff, but don't feel as encouraged there, and that's going to play out here in this next couple of weeks. About we talked about in the last podcast, which role players you might be able to package in the deal, who you want to hold on to, who you want to let go, and who you might bring back in return as well. Yeah, the Knicks traded away Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett, but they got back Precious Achua, who brings some versatility, as well as OG Anunoby. So I'm just saying all that to say I'm very keen on who and how this plays out over the next couple of weeks, and if they can solidify some weaker areas of that second unit, specifically protection at rim or just better defense overall in that inner paint area.
Yeah, I mean, I think Paul Reed hasn't made great strides as far as like exuding dependability and eradicating the odd head scratching plays from his game. And definitely noticeable last night that there were a couple of plays where right away Nurse's reaction was, "All right,
Right.
Paul's out, Mo's in." I was not a fan of what I just saw. There was one where
Those are
he
things you hate to see as a player. I know the player like, oh
yeah,
man, I
yeah,
messed
he
up.
made and like, of course, sometimes those work out for him, and he's got a little, b-ball Paul magic on occasion, but clearly, especially when Joel Embiid's off the floor and the minutes are going to be higher, uh, there's generally an expectation that you're going to play a little more conventionally and you're going to make sound decisions, and of course that you're going to avoid foul trouble, which was an issue for him again, and I think is definitely a like valid area to note as a continued weakness for Paul Reed. But yeah, I mean, I don't think the Sixers have been bad by any means at backup center, but I do think they have a lot of belief in Paul Reed, and right now it's hard to say that the team's confidence in him has grown leaps and bounds based on the way he's played. Clearly Nurse, relative to the way this season started, has shown an openness to go to Mo Bamba as well as to go to some centerless lineups. I think though, like projecting ahead to the postseason, games often end up with like your best five players always
Right.
being on the
Those
court.
guys play a lot less than the core.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also just even the like starless minutes or the Embiidless minutes, I think for many teams those look like small ball center lineups, or there's not like the conventional lumbering 7-footer interior focused player just getting many minutes in the postseason these days. So that's not to say that it's a sparkling situation at backup center and that Reed and Bamba have
I mean, it's
both
better than having PJ Tucker out there or whoever might have been in the past or taking up those time and minutes in the playoffs.
I guess perhaps, yeah. I mean, there are options for sure. I think it'll be interesting to see if we get some more like Bamba Reed minutes, just whether there's more experimentation with like Nick Batum at the 5, whether KJ Martin gets a little run in some small ball groups, and it hasn't been amazing clearly without Joel Embiid, 2-7 without him. And yeah, hard to say that's an encouraging area, but I think if we're doing like big picture analysis of where the team, has glaring flaws leading into the deadline, I don't see them as like a bad team at the center position behind Embiid. Um, but clearly that's also a hard argument to get wholeheartedly behind just based on the reality of the record without him.
DeAnthony Melton, I neglected to mention him. What did you see there, and what's the status update with him, and how's he progressing?
Yeah, played 21 minutes on a
Didn't
minutes.
see him down the stretch though. Didn't see him.
Yeah,
In
they
those
used the minutes up early,
yeah.
and of course, that's one of the downsides of a minutes limit, as Sixers fans will remember back in the day with Joel Embiid, is if a game goes to overtime and it's a real hard cap, then he's got to watch from the sideline. So, yeah, I mean, they were definitely glad to have him back out there. I think you could immediately see just that it's nice to have a role player who's capable of doing more than catch and shoot offensively, ran a couple nice pick and rolls with Reed, hit an early corner three. Didn't look amazing, showed a little rust, but I think by and large looks solid. And I think it's going to be a little day by day as far as how does he respond to a little higher minutes next game. And then ultimately the hope is he's back on track and able to play as many minutes as he was prior to the injury. But I think good for the Sixers to get him back out there. And they tend to look like a team with more possibilities, more ways to hurt you when he's available for them. So yeah, I think that was a plus to see him return, even if there wasn't any eye-popping numbers from the Anthony Melton. Tobias Harris obviously did quite good work.
That was where I was going next. So,
yeah, 32 and 10, and I think looked pretty comfortable with the clarity of the role here, that you're going to be quarterbacking our offense. You're going to be relied on for some of those ISO and post-up looks. We're going to need you to be really physical, really aggressive, assume some more leadership responsibility as far as the way we run our offense and the plays that we call. So I think given the circumstances of returning from an injury and being asked to do all that right away, thought it was a pretty strong night from Harris. And yeah, the Sixers obviously leaned a lot on Maxey and Harris for their scoring, and neither guy was like extraordinarily efficient, but I think both for the most part made pretty good decisions and were awfully productive for the Sixers.
Yeah, and nobody's perfect, and he was returning from missing some time. Some tough decisions down the stretch, some tough moments where missed layups, maybe he got a shot blocked on one drive, or maybe he had a chance at a three with Jalen Johnson closing out on him. And it just was a frustrating loss. And I'm kind of glazing over the frustration part of it as they lose in overtime, because they had some moments and opportunities. And it just felt like, if you were watching the game, that it was them trying to, get to the even point and then get past that, and they couldn't quite sustain, getting past it. So, but exciting and fun all the same. It surprised me to see him come back and play that way. You mentioned the fact that the efficiency, and that goes hand in hand with some of the things I was just saying. Are you, in your reconnaissance mission that was going down there, did you glean anything from seeing Tobias on the floor and DeJounte Murray and Bogdan Bogdanovic all sharing the floor together there? And did the thoughts kind of bubble up in your mind at all?
I wouldn't say they were too prominent. As you said, it was a very tight back and forth game. So that was definitely the focus. But yeah, Murray did a lot well. But Tyrese Maxey also put him in some highlights right late in this game. Just really explosive, kind of like mind-bogglingly quick and incredible plays for Maxey down the stretch. But yeah, Murray 25, 5 and 5. We saw definitely the ability to hit tightly contested, tough shots. And yeah, I think he looked as advertised as far as both in the half court and transition. There are ways he can hurt you, and there are ways he can pretty reliably score in whatever situation you put him in. So yeah, I'm sure the chatter with him will continue. And it definitely seems like Atlanta is justifiably open to really seriously retooling their roster around Young. And DeJounte Murray is a pretty good basketball player. I think not too controversial to say that. Yeah, Bogdanovic didn't get a ton of minutes, I believe, late. I think Atlanta went a lot with Sadiq Bey. So he's I think a guy who's used to adapting to a variety of roles, and you assume if he goes elsewhere, there are many ways you can play him. You can have him
Seems to be ripe for the picking because of the way his role is designated with the Hawks, and they're going with more of the youth movement, where he's not getting the time that maybe he would get on a team like the Sixers.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I think just regardless, it seems like the Hawks, are open for business. So,
Right.
yeah, Jalen Johnson, of course, a guy they are very pleased with the huge strides he's
Rightfully
made
so.
this
Yeah.
year. Trae Young is the star; he's the franchise cornerstone, and then I think it's pretty fair beyond that to at least be willing to listen. So, yeah, Bogdanovich. I think no one would be surprised if he's dealt at the deadline and ends up on a contending sort of team with a bench shot creator, sixth man, seventh man kind of role. And yeah, I think DeJounte Murray is at the forefront of the Hawks deadline conversations as well. And yeah, I thought he played a pretty good game, but I think honestly, my impression at the end was like there are levels to this, and Tyrese Maxey's I'm not Tyrese Maxey's
No,
a
I
better
agree
player
with
than him right
you.
now.
I agree. In the
Yeah.
head-to-head matchup, you know,
It just
you could,
became very, very
yeah,
like mano a mano, like a lot of just they were going at each other for a couple possessions straight there, and Maxey blew by him.
whoo,
One incredible dunk in which
right.
Okongwu challenged him at the rim too, and then Murray tried to get it back, and Maxey played really good defense, and Murray missed a fadeaway jumper against him. Definitely not a guy who looks outmatched ever athletically, and I think he's got a lot of great tools in that regard. But just like as an overall player, no, he's not like a Maxi All Star ish kind of guy, and
He's
that's
not.
fine.
He's
Everyone
not,
is, and Maxi is certainly special, and certainly continues to look worthy of an All Star spot.
bro. I wasn't going to say that. I was thinking the same thing. I was just going to leave it alone, but I'm so glad that you said it because um, on the NBA Instagram account, they posted that Maxi dunk and that step back three that he had. And I was just reading the comments, and you can glean so much from hearing non Sixers fans talk about players on your team or players who you're interested in to kind of see, what the um, barometer is. And uh, it was just like most improved. A lot of people just felt that way. This is like thousands of comments, so it's just a lot to sift through. But just seeing just people's instant reaction of oh man, Maxi's an all-star, most improved, and just watching the game, it was easy to see the difference between him and DeJounte Murray. Maxi's bag is different, man. It's just a different type of bag. We talked about the benefits of him playing with James Harden and that footwork and how much he took away from that, and adding his own tenacity to it. There was a video circulating around the web that many people have seen already of a young Maxi getting words of wisdom from KD at like a camp when Maxi before he went to Kentucky. And listen, I just we see it and maybe are spoiled by it in the same way we're spoiled by Joel Embiid and don't appreciate the ins and outs of maintaining this high level of competitiveness or gaining and achieving even more levels like Maxi. Like you see the progress and the maturation and the growth. And you know, if the Sixers do trade for DeJounte Murray, he would be second fiddle to whatever Maxi is now or will become. And not to say that Murray can't grow and make strides himself, but the what Maxi is into and where he's at right now, I just don't ever see that gap being, him, spanning that gap. But you were there, you saw it in person. I'm sure, like
Agreed.
you said,
No, I
yeah,
mean, yeah, those few minutes, like we've had Joel Embiid, feature for this team. Those 3 minutes were like up there with the best that I saw from a Sixer this year. I mean, might have been like the best. I mean, pretty unbelievable. Not he had 9 points on 3 for 3 shooting, two highlight dunks from a 6'2" player.
probably should have got fouled or went to the line on that.
Yeah, he could have gotten a whistle, could have gotten a Stars whistle in and
Yeah,
one, but like pretty unbelievable. And then I think, yeah, the stop was like the cherry on top. It wasn't just fluky that Murray, settled and kind of let Maxey off the hook. Like, no, he was really sturdy there defensively. He was really up for the challenge, and he guarded him well in isolation. So that was pretty incredible. And then the Sixers were on such a high and so close to the finish line. So I think it's a bummer that, it didn't coincide with the win, but also, intriguing to see Tyrese Maxey in a pretty darn big moment pull out a couple of dunks, which he said post game his teammates have kind of been prodding him to do, saying like, you can dunk, we see you do it. Why don't you actually start using that skill in games? And he kind of half jokingly said, yeah, I'm not going to miss the dunks the way I might miss layups. Definitely a higher percentage shot, and definitely an emotional lift when you see one of your stars who happens to not be that much over 6 feet tall just explode to the rim and throw it down like that. So yeah, there's always, of course,
Definitely caught the Hawks off guard.
yeah, and I think with dunks, maybe there's like the assumption that there's a slightly greater physical risk. You're throwing your body all the way up there in the air or whatever. But honestly, Maxey uh, does a lot of risky finishes that aren't dunks. Like, he's
Good point.
throwing his body in weird angles, semi like horizontally, and trying to draw contact and bumping into 7-footers with a huge head of steam. So I'm not opposed to the idea that maybe, when it's viable, a few layups, are now highlight dunks for Tyrese Maxey. I don't think there's anything wrong with that idea.
Maxey in the dunk contest next. Let's do it. Our producer Ben Barry is probably wondering what the heck I'm doing, because I was supposed to take a commercial break a while ago, but here we are. I'm taking it now. So let's talk about our title sponsor, Wilmington University. Find your higher education home at Wilmington University, where your academic success is celebrated by a caring community. Explore your opportunities at wilmu.edu. Hey, celebrity cook Steve Martirano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martirano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations for Martirano's Prime on Open Table. Back here live and in full effect on the Sixers Talk podcast. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this, Noah, but because of the way the schedule's playing out, some great games coming up, we will not be back with you until the back-to-back is over. So the Sacramento game is really interesting. Two really evenly matched teams. I think that's a national broadcast as well. And then I think it's Houston, and then someone else I'm forgetting. But
Then
the next a weird trip here, as they have 6 of 7 at home, but a trip to Atlanta in between 3 games at home, and now 3 more here at home. This Sixers team has been without Joel Embiid for 9 games. We hope he's back on Friday. I'm not going to ask you to give me an idea of whether you think he'll be back. I'm going to take it as encouraging that, like you said, he was out in the taking free throws at their last practice. He's missed this time here. He doesn't often miss national games. The clock is ticking on if he wants to be eligible for MVP, because he has to play at least 65 games. Going into Friday's game, Domantas Sabonis, let's think the Kings are completely healthy, a great team. I think they finished 2nd or 3rd in the West last season. What do you see going into that matchup in particular, as well as them finishing out this little quick homestand?
Yeah, again, I think would be really nice to nip the streak in the bud.
3-game losing streak, right?
Yeah, first,
Yeah.
3-game skid of the season, but yeah, you don't expect that to be easy against the Kings. I think pace will be a huge emphasis there. The transition defense will be tested. Darren Fox versus Tyrese Maxey is must see high pace sort of stuff.
Yes.
So yeah, I think try to keep moving in the right direction with like rebuilding those fundamentals, and remove some of those lax defensive moments where it's a little too easy for someone to blow by and get to the rim, or a guy falls asleep and gets back cut or what have you. Definitely Sacramento, a team capable of punishing those sorts of mistakes. And yeah, I think reintegrating the guys who returned last night will be important as well. and just continuing to sort through some of the questions with what rotations and what schemes make sense. Notably, Kelly Oubre Jr. slid back to the bench last night and didn't play well. 7 points on 3 for 11 shooting. And he said afterward, it's a mental shift. It was tough for him. And he also said, his foot was bothering him a bit. He said it's not an issue he's concerned about moving forward, but as we know, Kelly Oubre Jr. has some of those X factor wild card sort of qualities for this team where he can give you a big lift and he can vault you over the top at times against high level opponents. I think the Sixers, if they indeed keep bringing him off the bench, would sure love to see an improved performance. And yeah, I think some of that just comes down to, do you make or miss the open jumpers? But I thought overall he definitely had a subpar night. And if the idea is they really like Nick Batum as a starter, especially of course when Embiid is back in the mix, then it's important that you don't have a big drop off in Oubre's level of play as well. So I think that's an important thing to watch moving forward. And then I think also some of those fringe rotation guys, I'm still intrigued with what's next for them. Like Jaden Springer, yet again, I thought was awfully impressive playing defense on Trae Young and curbed some of the fouls that had been problematic for him this season. And I think showed off some of those tools that led Doc Rivers to describe him as, an elite defensive player one day. So is Springer kind of keep getting some minutes? And what's the back end of that rotation kind of look like? But yeah, for me moving forward, I think the starting lineup, Kelly Oubre Jr.'s performance, that's important for this team, and it's something I'll be interested to see over this homestand.
Yeah, there will be an interesting matchup, full house for sure on Friday in South Philly. So some of that Oubre energy will be very fun to have an impact on that game. We talked about our favorite celebrations of his a couple of podcasts ago, but hopefully Joel Embiid is back, something to monitor and keep an eye on. No practice today for the Sixers. More time for him to mend and get better. Friday will be a good test and a matchup everybody would love to see. So I'm sure Joel thinks about that type of stuff as well as he considers his health and availability. Check out Noah Levick's work on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com and show my boys some love because, I think you landed 2 hours ago and you're here, taping the podcast on the way back from Atlanta. So we appreciate your stick-to-itiveness and attention to detail and all of your work ethic as well. Noah, thank you. Follow him at Noah Levick on all social media platforms. For Ben Barry and Noah, I'm Danny Pommells. Thanks for listening and watching the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works. We'll see you next time.